Okay, it's my pleasure today to introduce Richard Uniacke. Richard has been the president of Bridges Outreach for 4.5 years. Prior to that, Rich was with the Community Food Bank. He was with them for 17 years. He started a lot of new innovative programs around the state. His final job was to be vice president of the Southern region, which is based in Egg Harbor Township. So apparently he had a 101-mile commute. He did some wonderful work at the food bank, and now will tell us about some of the new and innovative things that Bridges is doing. Rich.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you very much. I thought I would start by sharing a video that was recently produced pro bono by Propeller in Summit. One of our members of our board of trustees is the founder and CEO of that organization. Thanks.
I never thought in a million years I would ever be at Penn Station. I used to have a funny look at people who were homeless because I'm like, oh, you just out here begging. And I had that perception until I became homeless and started to understand it. We can't say that about people because we don't know their story.
I came in one night, the block was cut off at 2:30 in the morning. By the time I got around the corner, it was my building that was on fire. That was the beginning of my homelessness.
When you come here, meaning homelessness, it's by different means. You got here by different means. But it can happen to anybody.
It's hard to become homeless because you never think, I would never be homeless. I give out money all the time. That would never be me. Become homeless. That's when your insanity begins.
You want to go first, or you want me to?
No, ladies first.
I'm Ginger Warden, and some 30 plus years ago, my husband and I were curious about homelessness and wanted to make some sort of outreach to people who lived on the street. And we started coming into Lower Manhattan. And over time, it evolved into Bridges.
I'm Jeff Worden, and that makes perfect sense to me. The homeless population who live with great uncertainty all through the week. The one thing they knew was definitely coming was the Bridges truck on a Friday night.
A Friday night run really became something I looked forward to.
It became a beacon. I mean, people saw that yellow truck coming and they knew who we were. We weren't just some random group of people giving out sandwiches. This was Bridges. The difference between our organization and other organizations is that they have brick and mortar places and they sit there and behind their desks and they wait for people to come to them. Bridges has always taken the opposite approach. They're meeting people where they are on the street, metaphorically and physically.
The volunteer force is just phenomenal. Many of those come back week after week to many of the same locations and have formed pretty deep relationships with some of the folks seeking services. And there's this equality of humanism, right, that we are trying to establish.
Because they discharged you and now it's a Saturday, your only recourse would be to go to social services, which isn't open until Monday. right? Leaving you with no place to stay over the weekend.
Right.
And that's not right. We don't like that.
We are both human beings who are no different but for our circumstances. And I feel like that speaks to the origins of Jeff and Ginger taking to the streets in that way. Project Connect really began as an effort to help people more deeply than the outreach runs enabled us to do. We've shifted from being focused on outputs to being focused on impacts. So that was the attempt at Project Connect, was to have our own space where people could come in, be treated with that same dignity, and give us the opportunity to understand everything that we can really help you with.
For me now being on the other side and to give people the hope that was given to me is amazing when they walk out of here smiling. It's all right, baby. We're gonna make sure you're okay. The little things like that make their day, and that we put a smile on their face, or when they finally get their housing. It's like you want to throw a party because it's like it's someone else that we're getting that much closer to getting them off the street.
Most of the people who come to us who are currently experiencing homelessness need to be able to identify themselves in an official way. So they come to us in search of many of these identity documents that are the gateway to benefits. They're the gateway even to a shelter bed. So it often starts there, but that really is the tip of the iceberg, because what this team's able to do is make sure that they're getting enrolled in all of the benefits that they qualify for, that they can, explore workforce development opportunities, that they have a safe place to sleep, that they're headed down a path to a housing voucher, that their healthcare needs are met. It's a very holistic approach that our team takes. We're just constantly kind of scratching away at it, trying to peel away that onion and get to a place where we can help you more deeply than maybe what you first came for.
They want to hear your story. They want to really know. They care. But like, I wasn't going to win. And they say, you are going to win. We're helping you, but you got to help yourself. You got to believe in yourself. And I start believing. I've been staying in my apartment for 2.5 years now. The best thing to have my own home is my peace. My own peace of mind. My peace of mind, finally. And not knowing that I'm never going to lose it, knowing that I have a lot of support.
Newark is reported as being 16,000 affordable units short. And that doesn't even get into the permanent supportive housing needs that a lot of these folks are going to require from a housing first perspective.
Everything's always a waiting list. I feel like if you're already out here and you don't have nothing, you shouldn't have to wait to receive.
It's getting increasingly difficult when I play by everybody's rules, but I'm not receiving any of the, even the bare minimum.
We need more housing units for these folks, and we need to be part of building those housing units. It feels very urgent, and it feels like work that desperately needs to be done.
I mean, we've all experienced difficulties in our lives. People have experienced illnesses and all kinds of personal catastrophes. But when you don't even have a home, I still can't quite imagine it.
Bridges is uniquely positioned to help make a real, significant, and lasting change, and to equip and empower the entire community to end homelessness, so that when somebody finds themselves experiencing homelessness, we can be prepared to pick them up and place them somewhere.
It fills my heart to say that what I see in the leadership of Bridges is a group of very capable people who are making real strides toward ending homelessness. It really is an ambition that is worthy of support, and it makes me very proud.
Okay, well, this is going to be my favorite place. This is the kitchen, and I'm pretty much a gourmet cook. I'm gonna try to find me some hog maws and chitlins. You know what hog maws and chitlins are?
Yep.
Okay. Here we go with the bathroom. I'm excited about I can take a shower any day, anytime I want to. It's a big honor to be able to function normally again, you know?
Ultimately, we expect to end people sleeping outside in Newark, New Jersey, and in Summit, New Jersey, and throughout Essex and Union counties. The evidence is there. This model has worked, and it worked first in New Jersey.
I'm just like taking all of the good energy in and ready to start my new life, you know, my new chapter of life, you know.
What we hear from folks we serve about what it means to have a private space that is theirs, that is secure, with a front door that they can close and lock, is really about dignity, safety, security. It feels like what's right.
In virtually every religion around the world, there is a key philosophy which is akin to our treat your neighbor as you would want your neighbor to treat you. And I think it's been and continues to be at the very heart of what Bridges is all about.
Thank you very much. You know, it's really wonderful to be able to speak to a group of folks who are so familiar with Bridges, especially the origin stories, familiar with ubiquitous brown bag lunches and our work that began in New York City. And what's really been remarkable over the past several years, as we've all dealt with this COVID-19 pandemic and hybrid meetings and mask requirements, has been how much can change and has changed for the better. So you heard that I have been with Bridges less than 5 years. So I was entering 2020, right? Exiting 2019. And we had a new strategic plan and a new mission statement that for the first time, after 3 decades, had Bridges ending homelessness. Those are the first words of our mission statement. Bridges ends homelessness, right? And then we go on over the next sentence and a half about the ways that we do that. And we were really planning to lean in on that on-street work, right? So many of you will know of our street outreach, and it's volunteer supported and volunteer driven at times. And some of what I heard, you know, when I spoke with Mike and Paul, even in preparation for this meeting, was how important also the experience of the volunteers were, right? But the thing that we have really leaned on and really doubled down on in our time, and you heard some of this in that video, is what's possible for that person on the street, right? If you think about this, we're going out to New York City or to Newark or to Irvington once a week. We're bringing volunteers, we're bringing soup and brown bag lunches and hygiene kits and clothing items. What else can we do, right? We talk about the trust that we build, the rapport, the getting to know that person. Jeff and Ginger would always talk about the elimination of those barriers, right? They used to talk about bringing the housed and homeless together in community, right? Well, to what end? That's the question that was really eating away at the back of my brain as I joined Bridges after 17 years at the community food bank, seeing tens of millions of pounds of food being distributed each year, about 50 million pounds a year by the time I left. Now, more like 100 million pounds of food because of what the COVID pandemic has done to food insecurity. But the big thing for me was, and we are not ending hunger here, are we? Right? Not that it's the food bank's fault. They're an amazing organization doing really, really important work. But that's the point of this, right? Is not to keep feeding people who are experiencing homelessness on the street or making it more comfortable for them to be on the street. The point of outreach has got to be to eliminate the need for outreach, right? That there isn't a line of human beings who are living on the streets of our cities waiting for us every week to show up. I mean, that's crazy, right? Nobody wins if that's our mindset, if that's what's happening in this society, right? So we are entering 2020 and planning to double down on not just thinking about the impacts that we can make and making them, but leveraging what we know from those relationships, from those stories, to help make changes in the system. Because you may not be aware of this, but Bergen County, New Jersey, and I referenced it in the video, Bergen County, New Jersey was the first community in the US to achieve what's called functional zero for chronic homelessness. And it's a data-driven, continuous improvement process, which is the way most people think about their businesses, right? Even when that business is a not-for-profit corporation. So that's the shining example. These folks were invited to the White House, first in the nation, 7th in the nation to achieve that for veteran homelessness. So it can be done. So how do we think about our role in that work, right? How do we think about the relationships that we have with folks who are experiencing homelessness and the things that they tell us about their journey in effort to improve the system itself, the one that got us here, right? When you go to New York City and you go through Newark Penn Station or New York Penn Station, people who are living in the corners, in the walkways, asking for money, asking for food. Nobody wants that, least of all of them. And in New York City, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but they have a legislative right to shelter. If they want shelter, the city is required to give it to them. And they spend hundreds of millions of dollars a year in New York City to make that possible. And yet they have more people living unsheltered than any other city in this nation. And why is that? I mean, the short answer is a lack of affordable housing. But why aren't they in the shelters is a really important takeaway. And the reason for that is because they're not safe. And they'll probably be treated like an inmate from the moment they walk in, have their things stolen from them, maybe be attacked, maybe murdered. And that's what they tell us. So what do we do with that information? Right, so our plan was to take the model called Built for Zero from Bergen County and apply that in Essex County. So we brought the people from Built for Zero in, and then COVID hit, right? You'll all remember the middle of March in 2020 as we're all getting text alerts to our phone that if you've recently been in New York City, you should quarantine for 14 days. So we stopped going to New York City. And we stepped back and said, all right, well, what are we going to do here? Because we're all being told to stay home, right? Simple advice, just stay home. Except that the people we're here to serve can't follow that advice. Can't stay home if you don't have one. So what's Bridges' role? So by the end of March, we had formed a partnership with the Department of Health in the city of Newark to develop a 7 nights per week outreach and engagement program in Newark. Newark has by far the greatest number of people experiencing homelessness of any community in New Jersey. The point in time count, which is required to be done annually by HUD at the federal level, generally involves volunteers. It'll be done later this month. And it yielded in 2022 a number of about 1,600 people experiencing homelessness in Newark out of about 1,900 in all of Essex County. Union County was number 2 for the first time in quite some time and represented no more than 2/3 of that number. I don't recall their full number. It's all publicly available. But the work most needed to be done in Newark. So we figured we'd lean in. And beginning April 1st of 2020, we've had a team of outreach specialists, we now call them, on the streets until 11 p.m. every day, 365 days a year. On New Year's Eve, our team was out there on the streets of Newark. And it's been interesting because it started as approaching someone with those key questions, right? That is the initial COVID questions. Hi, do you have a fever, cough, shortness of breath? Been around somebody who does? Yes, we have a hotline for you. No, we have a hotel room for you. Because the city of Newark stood up the Holiday Inn out by Newark Airport on Frontage Road as a non-congregate shelter. So that became a new problem with the shelter system. The fact that they're congregate, they're dorm style, and that isn't very conducive in a respiratory pandemic. And if you'll recall, those early days, we were worried about community spread. We were worried about fomites. And we had people experiencing homelessness who were contributing to that. And also, as the New York Times reported, uniquely susceptible to this virus because they had compromised immune systems and lived in unhygienic, often congregate settings. So the city of Newark gets a bad rep, but they took bold steps in standing up this hotel. And that time really changed everything, right? Because everything changed for us when we were all told to stay home. Bureaucracies, rules, all became pliable, some immediately broken. Jobs that would never have been remote were instantly remote. You had to figure it out. You can't come into work, you got to stay home, we're going to figure this out, right? So how do we use that crisis to change a system that is so broken it has hundreds of thousands of people living outside in places that are not conducive to human habitation? And you often hear people say, well, some of those folks would just rather be homeless. Well, we proved in those first few months that that's not true, because when you were able to offer them their own space in the form of a hotel room and 3 meals a day and case management services on site, everybody's hands was up. Everybody. No one said no. We didn't have enough rooms. So suddenly we've really challenged that view. And what next? This was a temporary pandemic solution. I mean, I tell you, within a couple of weeks, I was turning to the head of the health department saying, you realize you can't unring this bell, right? You can't stop this, or you'll put 400 people back on the streets. Suddenly, we had to be thinking about long-term solutions as a community, because Bridges can't figure out how to suddenly house 400 people. You know, we're a small private not-for-profit. We don't have that kind of money yet, right? But you had to start thinking that way. So we did, as a community. We suddenly found ourselves in these standing Friday morning, 8 a.m. meetings with people from the state health department, the county, the city of Newark. Cameras on, ready to rock, 8 a.m. Friday morning, every single week. It was really remarkable how we came together during crisis to start dealing with the needs of a very vulnerable population in the wake of a respiratory virus and trying to say, well, where are we going to go from here? Because suddenly tackling homelessness of the kind that we were exiting 2019 thinking we were going to do. We're not just going to go out there and ameliorate the symptoms of homelessness. We're going to tackle it. Suddenly tackling it was part of a public health response, an important part. And it really changed everything. So suddenly you've got Bridges getting primetime news coverage on the streets because everybody else was told to stay home and they stayed home, right? And we were able to start seeing real change, a real pathway out of homelessness for the people we were engaging, right? Because we could offer them a shelter bed from the streets that they could say yes to in the form of a hotel room. But the other really important thing that came out of this, besides kind of the newfound status of Bridges Outreach, was the data, right? The power of data. We all think about that in our works. You were referenced before as being like the KGB on the data of your attendance or lack thereof, right? Well, the problem with homelessness, a problem with homelessness is that we really have no idea how many people are experiencing homelessness, right? I told you before, I'll use round numbers, about 1,600 of Essex County's 1,900 are homeless in Newark. In 2022, about a year ago, the number of unsheltered people was counted as 134. Well, I can tell you that since our team is out there every single night and documenting every single person we engage in what's called the HMIS, the Homeless Management Information System, that we have deduped our list so far, we'll say as of December 18th of last year. And there had been more than 1,140 unique, unduplicated human beings who experienced unsheltered homelessness in the city of Newark in 2022. That's more than 8 times the number that was reported to HUD and on which important federal funding decisions are based. Now that starts to really change the role of Bridges Outreach, right? We're not just out here with volunteers handing things out. We are reporting findings of the highest quality of an unsheltered homeless population because we're documenting it every single day. And those needs that they are facing and their status as a veteran or a member of the LGBTQIA population. All of that matters because you can't end veteran homelessness unless you can identify every homeless veteran and find them, right? And there are different pockets of money and different pathways out of homelessness depending on your situation. Are you a mother with children, right? Are you disabled? All of that matters. So our ability to gather these data points and to use this information makes the entire community more effective at tackling homelessness, right? Back to the idea that Bridges can't do it all, but if we know how many people need behavioral health care, we can marshal the resources. If we know how many people need substance use treatment, we can marshal the resources. If we can better articulate the need in the community and better make a case for funding support, we can get more funding. Because in 2022, even though New Jersey got more money from HUD to tackle homelessness, Essex County got less year over year. Bergen County got almost the same amount of money, call it $6 million, as Essex County did and got an increase. Hudson County got an increase and received 50% more funding than Essex County. How are we supposed to deal with having the biggest need in the state if we're doing a piss poor job of articulating that need to the feds and are getting a reduction in funding, right? That becomes something that we as Bridges can contribute to in a way we really couldn't pre-COVID. And unfortunately, you heard me say uniquely positioned in that video. The other side of the coin of uniquely positioned is obligation. We have to. There isn't anybody else who can do it, right? So the onus is on us. And that's how we think about this work today. Every time we go out to the streets, whether it's as a pair of outreach specialists or it's supported by volunteers, that engagement on the streets is really important. Beyond being able to give you food and a warm coat, beyond being able to have a volunteer understand a person's journey and have it change their life. We now think about them from the perspective of 3 different buckets, right? Are you stably housed and food insecure? Because if you came out here just for the food, we want to make sure you have a list of food pantries and soup kitchens in your area. That's about all we can do for you. We're not a mobile food pantry. We're working on ending homelessness. If you're unstably housed, you're worried about your housing and your food insecure, we should be talking to a case manager, because preventing homelessness is much more efficient, right? That upstream work has become so much more important. The tsunami of evictions that has been foretold, you're probably well aware, that's starting to happen, right? The courts are backed up. So preventing someone from needing a shelter bed is some of the best work that we can do. And of course, the third bucket being you are currently experiencing homelessness right now, in which case you really need to talk to one of our case managers, because we might be able to get you a dignified place tonight that will enable you some sort of stability so that our case managers can work with you. Because those are the folks who are really the miracle workers, who are working through this kind of continuum, right? It begins often by helping someone establish their identity, because if you're carrying all of your personal belongings with you everywhere you go, and you risk them being stolen or discarded as you leave them someplace, you often need help establishing your identity in the form of a birth certificate, a social security card, a state issued ID. You know, we all carry a driver's license probably in our wallets at all times because you're supposed to. And we all know where our social security cards and birth certificates are, probably in some safe place, right? Well, these folks don't have that luxury. So it always begins there, and it goes through all the benefits, all the enrollments, all the healthcare needs, everything that you think of when you think of homelessness, right? All the way up to housed and thriving. Any of you recognize the bearded gentleman that was in that video? His name is Lester. He was chronically homeless in the city of Summit for more than a decade. And I'm thrilled to say that he has his own apartment right now. And we did that by raising private funds. Yeah, to the Summit train station. Many of you will remember him. You know, we raised funds privately in Summit with the help of Central Presbyterian Church. And we're in a Presbyterian church right now, are we not? In order to rent an apartment as though it were a private voucher system, because it's nearly impossible, it seems, to get a housing voucher for somebody in Summit, regardless of how long they've been living on the streets. Whereas in Newark, our team has been able to house 64 people so far in 2022. Well, I guess 2022 is over. So in 2022, we housed 64 people. And that's up from 45 in 2021. It's our biggest number yet, and we're really proud of it. But the real work is not even just that day-to-day interaction. The real work, I think, is that systems change, because it's a very broken system that gets us here. And we all have this shared goal of being able to go through Newark Penn Station and not have to see people experiencing homelessness or being asked for money by somebody who's homeless. And we might not have the same motivations behind it, whether you're the mayor of Newark or the CEO of Prudential, but we're all at least aligned on that goal. And with the state investing about $180 million in Newark Penn Station to make it a gem of a transit hub, they also really care about solving for the fact that there are 80 to 100 people who are living in that train station and sleeping there every night. So this, to me, is a moment of stars aligning. It is a moment that we have been trying to meet, because it's an opportunity to make lasting change, right? Suddenly there are long-term solutions being sought, right? Suddenly, you know, the governor's office and the federal government that just released a plan working on ending homelessness, and the city of Newark that has just the week before Christmas launched their strategic plan to end homelessness, bringing in Built for Zero, which is how Bergen County achieved it, and which, you know, we were able to contribute pretty significantly to. And Bridges finds itself in a place of a key strategic partner and an important entry point for the system in both our Newark office at Project Connect and our outreach efforts. And it turns out, because there's an Office of Homelessness Prevention at the state with a new director of that office, who used to be our director of programs and impact, in fact,
It turns out that if you look at the data for the entire state, Bridges is number 2 in volume in the entire state of New Jersey. It's just not something we thought to even pursue a couple of years ago. We didn't know where we stood. We didn't necessarily care. We were just trying to do this work and do it the best we could in the area that most needed us to do it. So it's really changed the way we think of ourselves and our work, and the way that the state, the powers that be, in fact, think about and talk about Bridges outreach from Summit, New Jersey. So we think about 2023 and beyond with our new strategic plan aimed at continuing improvements in our own work and those volunteer experiences and the outcomes for people we engage both on the streets and in our offices. And we're working to make sure that it's not just a Newark story, right? This is working really well at Newark. The community came together in a way we couldn't have hoped for before COVID. So in Summit, right next door, you hear lots of reports of increased homelessness in the train station at the downtown area. And we are working with the mayor and council, and the Summit Interfaith Council, and the Summit Warm Hearts Group, and the folks at Beacon and Grace to do all the same things. Because that kind of integrated approach is the only way to tackle it. It's a very siloed thing, right? The police interact with people who are experiencing homelessness, as do the fire department and the EMTs, but they don't necessarily share that data. They pop up on the radar screen at the emergency department at Overlook Medical Center pretty often, right? They'll pop up at SHIP because they're coming for a breakfast, or at the library, or at Beacon's drop-in center, or at our drop-in center at the Oaks Center on Morris Avenue. And until you can do what we are doing in Newark and Essex County, and what they first did in Bergen County, and break away those silos and merge those radar screens to get a complete picture of the need, right? They call it a quality by name list. Who are all the people who are seeking these services in the community? Until you can get to that, you have a hard time wrapping your arms around this problem and ultimately working to solve it. So that's our approach in the areas that we do this work, is thinking holistically, right? We have outreach folks, we have volunteers to help us with that, we have case managers to do the full assessments, we have strategic partners within kind of the ecosystem, and then we have the systems themselves, which unfortunately in New Jersey, you know, the story is basically, if you know one county, you know one county, because they all do things differently, right? 565 municipalities and 614 school districts. Figure that math out. So we have to navigate different systems and try to fix different systems. But I think that's what we're called to do, right? I feel the same way that I felt about the food bank, in that I don't want to be a part of doing this for another 3 decades in the same way. So it can't be about always doing outreach to the same cities and bringing volunteers and brown bag lunches. The purpose of those outreach efforts to the streets has to be to get rid of that line entirely, to solve this problem, and to work ourselves out of business. I realize that may not be something that you hear very often, where a speaker says he's trying to put himself out of business, but I very much am, and I'll find something else to do, because this is something that can be solved. In fact, was first solved in our state. So that's Bridges today, built very much on the foundation of meeting people where they are from a place of caring, as Jeff and Ginger did 35 years ago this year, 1988. And we hope that within the next 35 years, we're able to reach functional zero in at least Newark and Summit. And I believe that we can. So I appreciate it very much, the time, the opportunity to tell you about our journey and where Bridges is today. And I'd be happy to take any questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rich. And let's start with a question from online. Ken, I'm sorry, in person, Ken.
Yay. You're obviously articulate and motivated, but I think the most pleasing part of what I heard is that I think you are an organization man. You understand that the infrastructure is the answer. And it's the first time I've heard various presentations to address this problem that I think get to the core. If you can organize and put in place the infrastructure and marshal the resources in an organized infrastructure, it seems to work. And I don't think you should worry about working yourself out of a job, because I think globally there's plenty to do. That's not a question, that's just a comment.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that.
Paul, online?
We have one online, and I have a question. So why don't we do Bill Tittle online first?
Rich, thank you very much. You're very impressive. Doing the hard work that you do, I think keeping optimistic, keeping positive, it's a real challenge. I hope you find something, I don't know, origami or something way offline to recharge your batteries. What sources of funding do you have? Because that's really important.
I appreciate that question, Bill. Some might accuse me of asking you for that soft pitch because we are mainly funded by individuals and their generosity. We have had in 2022, and I think probably within the next couple of months, we'll be releasing our 2022 financials. We've had a lot of success with grants and with public funding. That's an increasing opportunity for us is public funding as homelessness becomes part of a public health response, and much more interest is placed on this work, especially the upstream prevention work. We're pleased to have been awarded $225,000 from DCA, the Department of Community Affairs in the state of New Jersey, for use in Essex County in what's called diversion. And this diversion is literally diverting someone from the shelter door. And it's almost entirely pass-through funding. It doesn't really help us keep the lights on, but it enables our folks to be very, very creative in saying, if your car is about to be repossessed, for example, and that means you can't go to work, and that means you're going to lose your home, and that means you're going to be homeless, we can pay to help you keep your car. Right? We can, if you're doubled up sleeping on someone's couch, and with inflation, you're an increased burden to that household, and they're going to have to ask you to leave. And I might add, being asked to leave a shared residence is actually the #1 cause of homelessness. We can provide a cash payment of a few $100s a month to keep you in that household, anything to keep you housed. But ultimately, like I said, that funding, while we've been successful with it, doesn't really help us keep the lights on. It's the generosity of individuals that does that. The case management work that these folks do that is so critically important that I would be terrible at, because these stories just stay with me and they hear hundreds of them a year. We have to fundraise for. Medicaid doesn't reimburse us the way they do, some of the clinical work from psychiatrists and psychologists, so we're not able to bill for it. So I have to go out and do things like this all the time and ask people to support the impact that we are making. So thank you, Bill.
Paul?
So just to summarize what you were just saying, clearly there are opportunities for all GUARD members to donate to Bridges and further this excellent work. I'd like to say, Richard, I am just so impressed and so inspired by your passion, your determination, and your creativity in solving these problems. And it's just astounding, and the results you're getting. And I told you on the phone, I was there at Christ Church 35 years ago. I knew Ginger and Jeff when they started Bridges, and they first saw some homeless people that I want to do something on the ground. And I was the tech support person at Christ Church all those years when Lois Bott was there and the Bridges office was there, and I was the tech support person. And you share the same passion and creativity as in the beginning. And it's just amazing how you've been taking it several levels up and getting all these results. I will just mention that you probably know this already. Next week, we're going to have a talk on the community food bank. I didn't realize you're close, so you're welcome to join us at least by Zoom, if not in person. And thanks to Mike Bennett for lining up these two talks and others. This is a great story. I just have one simple question. Why is the van white and not yellow?
That's such a good question. Thank you for your kind words. So our yellow truck, the ubiquitous yellow truck, got totaled in 2020 while in Newark. Who would have thought that a little bit of fiberglass getting shaved off the front would mean the insurance company wanted to total it? So we had to buy a van. And we have just been, really frugal throughout this pandemic, right? We haven't been able to throw big fundraising events, which was always, once upon a time when Lois was around, you'd have a big brown bag bash, and that would basically carry you through the entire next fiscal year. We're not in that space anymore. We're a bit of a larger organization, and we don't have the benefit of huge galas. So we bought this white van, which serves us a little bit better in terms of its functionality and its lower threshold. But we haven't yet gotten it wrapped, which will keep it yellow at the base, because I believe, and I know there are a lot of folks who are, for whom the history is near and dear and it just has to be yellow. But for me, the way I've seen that is that Bridges really is a beacon in the community, right? And when they see that yellow truck vehicle coming, they do know it's Bridges. Anybody, right? Whether it's a partner or it's a person in need. So when we had, again, pro bono redesign of our logo, we told them it had to work on a base of yellow, because our vehicles, at least, will always be yellow. But running a not-for-profit, I don't like to spend money. You'll hear me say things like pro bono all the time, because that's my favorite price. Our strategic plan was actually done by McKinsey pro bono. We couldn't have afforded them otherwise, right? So since I haven't gotten anyone to pay for that wrap job yet, as like a sponsorship to get their name on there, which is how we're positioning it, I haven't spent the money yet, but we have somebody who wants to do it. So I think in Q1, we'll have it wrapped, well-designed, and on a base of yellow.
If I could, just one quick follow-up comment. In those early years, while I was watching Bridges, and there was a component of it then which you're not focused so much on now, because you're doing all these other things which are amazing. But the program for a lot of years was based on these teams of volunteers, and the volunteers would often be youth groups in churches or Boy Scouts and Cub Scout groups, or just members and ordinary people, and they would go out on these runs and hand out this food and be directly involved in outreach, personally directly involved in outreach. And it had a big impact on the volunteers themselves, the kids themselves. So, supportive of these programs is not just writing checks, it's hands-on, and it has a big impact on all of those participants, all of those years.
Yeah, and if I could just touch on that real quick, I've gotten into a little bit of trouble over the years, these few short years, with some of the folks on the board when I talk about outreach from the way that I talk about outreach. And we are absolutely never getting rid of the runs and the opportunities for volunteers to engage in this way. The big difference is just in what's possible from the streets, right? It's not just about the numbers of people that we see and the numbers of things that we give out. It's that you're now a part of
handing things out to people on the front lines, while our team of specialists are engaging with them more deeply, so that instead of somebody walking away with a brown bag lunch and a warm winter coat, they may be walking away with a brown bag lunch, a warm winter coat, and a bed to sleep in tonight, and a case management appointment tomorrow morning, et cetera, et cetera. At least that's my hope.
Joel or Paul, anyone else online?
No.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, one second. though.
Sure.
I guess we have another minute, and I'm going to take the MC's prerogative here and ask a question.
Sure.
I was struck when Mike introduced you. He talked about your background at the food bank and, of course, at Bridges. But we didn't hear anything more. And I'd be kind of curious, because somewhere along the line, perhaps parents, perhaps teachers, perhaps colleagues, put you on the path that you are on today and really doing the work of the Lord. And I would love to hear what those influences were.
Sure. I'm laughing because it's a funny story to me. And it's something that I was asked about recently. I was asked if I was always the kid who wanted to help. And the answer is no. I was a pain in the ass for sure. My father was an FBI agent, which is probably where I got my sense of service. And a special forces soldier before that. My mother is still a teacher. And I grew up just down the hill in Westfield, and really had no idea of food insecurity, right? We weren't the rich kids in town, and you know what my parents did, but I was still growing up very privileged, myself and my sisters. And I went off to college, and I'm one of those young people who had a great time that semester. And that was about all I could say for it at that point in time in my life. And I started doing other things, and I waited tables, and I bartended, and I sold cars for 1.5 years at a big high volume highway dealership. And I was working at the Bennigan's in Springfield on Route 22. That's now a Longhorn Steakhouse, I think. And I had a regular customer who would come in, who was a former lawyer at the Manhattan DA's office and had left the practice of the law to focus on her growing family, and had started working at the Community Food Bank of New Jersey. And did to me then, she was kind of like, ribbing me on the fact that there was really no future in the restaurant business. Did to me then what I did to people for the next 17 years. And I said, why don't you come take a tour? Come see what it's all about. And when you have no idea, and even if you do, and you go take a tour in Hillside at the Community Food Bank of New Jersey, it's shocking. It's overwhelming. It's this massive 280,000 square foot warehouse. I used to be the director of marketing there, so I know a lot of the data. And they're serving the entire state. All those food pantries and soup kitchens. At the time, I said, what the heck? I'll give it a shot. And that was April of 2001. And I enrolled at Kean University full-time at night to start that September 2001. So I was there for September 11th, and it changed my life in many ways. I mean, having a dad who was a federal agent and working out of New York was an interesting time, and he was working at Ground Zero. But seeing the outpouring of support was really an eye-opening experience, because every day we would arrive by about 6 a.m. voluntarily. Nobody was making us do this. And there would be a line of trucks up the street on Evans Terminal and then down the avenue. And there would be hundreds of volunteers hoping to get a spot to volunteer every single day. And these trucks were coming from all over the continent, because we were, the Community Food Bank was designated as critical infrastructure, and things that were being sent to Ground Zero by well-meaning folks. They'd gathered all kinds of things like t-shirts and undergarments and dog food for rescue dogs, right? All the things that we thought were going to happen. And they were all being sent to us at the food bank to be resorted and palletized to then go wherever. And then I was there when the economy collapsed in 2008, and I was there. We had Bruce Springsteen helping us say things like, "We can't let this bank fail." And I was there during Superstorm Sandy, and that time at the food bank taught me a few things. It taught me the importance of these kinds of critical services, especially in times of crisis, and how the community can really rally around a cause. But it also showed me the humanity of struggle. In those early days, I started a program called the Kids Closet that was distributing packages of branded children's clothing to kids in need. And it was 3 to 5 outfits each. And we had a grandmother come to us to say that she had custody of 2 of her grandkids and that they never wanted for food, but that new clothing for back to school was really never in the budget, and that they had to share gym clothes, and that one of them was always failing gym. And when she told us afterwards that they walked differently to school the next day, after finally getting clothes that were new and that were theirs for the first time, that has stuck with me now for more than 20 years. And I still can't say it without feeling choked up. And it has shown me that our neighbors in this great affluent state are struggling in ways that we can't see and that we can maybe not even imagine. And I just came to understand and to believe that people deserve better, and that there are ways to help, really, really significantly powerful ways to help. And I really feel very, very fortunate to have been able to find work that I could be so passionate about and that felt like it was worth doing. And a wise man once said that we do this work for selfish reasons, and it's because it feels very, very good. And that's how I got it.
Rich, thank you so much for sharing that. And more importantly, thank you for all that it is that you do. At this stage, I'm going to ask Mike to come on up and present the certificate to Rich.
You may or may not know, Richard, that back in 1930, Summit was known as the orchid capital of the world. There were dozens and dozens of greenhouses. In fact, the last one didn't leave until 1975 for affordable housing. Thank you for this fantastic presentation. I'm sure everybody is totally enthralled by the work you're doing. So I wish to present you the certificate of appreciation. And that was just a fantastic talk. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Thank you all.